you go on the day you book. The boat leaves at 9 in the evening, and you start at midnight on the day you have chosen a year ahead of time. My friend Attila Manioki in the Cook Strait waited 5 weeks for the swim. So Catalina is very predictable in that respect. And then I think the final thing for Catalina is, relatively speaking, compared to some of the other water, it's almost always a nice water. It's almost always calm. You almost always get a little bit of wind if you swim too long. But the storms they can see for 2 weeks coming across the Pacific. So it's a calmer, more predictable piece of water.
Definitely, I totally agree with you with everything you said. And even though President Trump doesn't believe in global warming, the water is very warm. During the summer, it's really nice. You can be 21, 20 degrees Celsius, which is, like a bathtub for some of us.
I have to ask you, in Cabo, the water temperature was 23 degrees, which I have to tell you, I have decided is the perfect temperature for swimming. I don't really think it counts down where you live because the water is too nice. I think you need to move up here where it's always cold.
Yes. I remember. My 5 weeks in Donaghadee, and I always was thinking that the water will be warm, and it never got warm during those 5 weeks.
So this is up in Northern Ireland. Was that one of your toughest swims?
No, my toughest swim was Molokai. Molokai was a swim that I have to say, a friend of mine told me one day that when you complain a lot, it's like uphill both ways, back and forth. That was Molokai. It was uphill, back and forth. I mean, it was really, really complicated for me.
Was it? Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Was that 24 hours? I don't remember.
It was 23 hours and 18 minutes. And when I looked at the watch, and I remember the club, the 24-hour club, I said, well, should I just stay a little bit longer and get to the 24? But I was so tired. I said, no, I'll do that all the time. I mean, I want to finish now.
And was Molokai difficult? Obviously the length of time is difficult, but was there a shark fear? Were there giant ocean swells? Were there other elements, or just the length of time?
No, it was the day got complicated from the beginning. It was a lot of big waves. I couldn't see either the boat or the kayak, and the kayak are usually close to the swimmer in Molokai. And then the other thing that was really difficult for me was the stings of the jellyfishes. It really hurt. I mean, I was hard, being very, very hard by jellyfishes. And, Ned and Stephen, there's something that I always tell people, that I don't think that sharks are something that open water swimmers should think about or even be fearful of. For me, the jellyfishes are the worst part of the swims. I mean, jellyfishes are really, really bad.
I have to agree with you on sharks. So if I'm going to a swim that has that kind of wildlife, I don't even call them sharks, I call them wildlife. The first thing I do is I stop watching all the Discovery stations for 2 months. I don't watch any of that stuff on television. And I rely on my crew to keep me safe. So my job is to ignore the wildlife. My job is to swim, not to look around, not to check things out. That's the job of the crew. And probably like you, if the crew tells me to go left, to go right, to get out, I just obey the crew. I don't discuss or negotiate. That's their problem. One of the things that some of the viewers might not quite understand if they've not been in the situation is it is possible to do a swim where the waves or the swells are so big that you often can't see the boat. And if the swells are so big, they won't put a kayaker in. You just have to trust you're going the right way. And you also have to have confidence that perhaps the boat can actually see you from time to time. But it is a disorienting feeling if you've always been able to see the boat and you find yourself in big conditions and you can't see it.
Yep. You mentioned something that's really interesting for our viewers, Ned and Stephen, is that you have to trust your crew. If you doubt your crew, you're going to be in big trouble. And this is something that I've learned through, after 20 years of doing open water swimming, is that you don't ask questions. When you start, you have to have certain guidance with your boat, your crew, and what you're going to be doing, especially the feeding and how you're going to be reporting your different symptoms. But don't get into arguments. I mean, I've seen and heard stories from people that they start, getting almost into a fight with the crew, and the crew is not, they're doing their job and they're telling you what to do, and that's a very good, thought for anybody who's doing open water swimming is you have to trust your crew and don't discuss with your crew. I mean, that's a big one.
I remember in the English Channel, in the darkness one time, my crew chief was a very short, large man, and the visibility was terrible, but I could see a bump on the back of the boat. I could see a bump, and I didn't really know if it was a tarpaulin covering a bunch of cases or something, but I just absolutely believed that my crew chief, Martin Cullen, was there, and he was watching every single stroke that I was taking, and he was loving me and caring for me. And I never asked at the end of the swim if that was him or if he had been sleeping and just threw a tarp over some boxes or something. You have to believe. So besides Molokai, what were your other tough swims?
I want to jump in here about the crew. Actually, this was one of the reasons why the Ocean 7 was picked, because I knew that actually dealing with the crew in a foreign country, in a foreign language, was a big test of any swimmer. So Antonio, you had to deal with the Japanese crew in Japan, down in New Zealand, up in the North Channel, Strait of Gibraltar. And this is a huge test for any swimmer, to be adaptable, to get to know the crew, to trust the crew. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And Antonio, you had to deal with 7 completely different crew members or team in your Ocean 7. And I think you did an extraordinary job doing that.
Thank you, Stephen. It was not only my job, it was the job of the crew. I mean, I have to say that all the captains of the boats and the help in the boats were really tremendous. Different type. For example, the guys in Hawaii are really funny. I mean, they're very relaxed. I mean, the most relaxed swim is Hawaii. I mean, it was very tough, but they're very relaxed. Philippe is a pain, I have to say. Philippe is very, very unpredictable. I mean, Philippe is you never know when he's going to answer you. I mean, he's very complicated. Quinton Nelson in the North Channel, he and Mike Oram probably are the 2 best seamen I've known in my life. And it was really when I got to Donagadi, and the first day we went and talked to Quinton, Lucia came with me. And Lucia is obviously, she's not a swimmer, but the way Quinton explained what I was going to be confronting in my swim, and he showed me the charts, and he told me where going to be the big moments in the swim. And then when he took me in at the end, it was just fantastic. I mean, he's a guy with very few words. I mean, you don't chat with Quinton. I mean, it's not the guy you can invite to the pub and have a couple of beers and chat. And Mike Oram, he has taken me. Well, he's taking many people across the English Channel, and I'm looking forward to see him again, hopefully this summer. But the other thing, when we went to Japan, Stephen, and this is something that I have to say for our viewers who are thinking to going to Tsugaru, is that Tsugaru for me was a not only a swim, but also the opportunity to reflect on my swimming and on my life. Going from a city like Mexico City and stopping over in Tokyo, and then arriving in Tapi, where I think they only have about 500 people and all seamen. I mean, that's the end of the Japan. I mean, that's the end of the world. It's very funny because the big highways, it's only one highway where the highway ends, and it's a two-way. You know, not two cars can go by at the same time. But what was the name of the captain?
Your captain was Miyazaki, not Miyazaki. It was Mizushima.
Mizushima.
Yeah.
You know, when you looked at his eyes, he was always calm. You know, he was never concerned. I mean, to me, it was amazing because, as you say, you know, you were always looking at the boat. And the nice thing about Japan is that you have the cloth, that you're following the cloth. And that's so beautiful because like having a lane.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about, you know, keeping the distance with the boat. So the captain was always very calm and very introspectful. So yes, dealing with the crews is something that can be a challenge. But I think that the guys in my case, my crews were always wonderful.
Great.
Just for everyone who's listening, the cloth that Antonio refers to in Japan, the style of a swim is to essentially drag a line that the swimmer is supposed to swim on top of, and they do that for safety reasons. A lot of the swims around the world, the rules are slightly different. In the Cook Strait, for example, you're allowed to come on the boat for a few minutes if they spot particularly aggressive sharks. Each place has slight different wrinkles on their rules. In Cabo, you're in the path of migrating whales. So if it's a big problem, you're supposed to get on the back of the kayak and they head toward shore for 1 minute in kind of a backwards direction, just to get you out of the path. Although I fancy taking on the whale because I had the right of way. I'm smaller. I wasn't under engine power. I was older, and I thought I should have the right of way.
Yes, and we always thought you were gonna ride the whale.
I trust me, I would have if I could have. Any advantage I could get a hold of.
I wonder if that would have been against channel swimming rules to grab onto a marine life.
I can find somebody who would tell me it was absolutely against the rules, and I could find somebody who would tell me it was absolutely not against the rules.
You know this thing about the rules is this is something that very few people know, and I think it's been so many years that I can tell it now, and you will remember it, Stephen, because you were the first one who heard it. So I finished Ocean 7. I had this big article in the front page of the sports section of the New York Times, and I'm just glowing. Okay, so on Sundays it's my day off. I don't swim. I just stay at home. And suddenly I turn on my computer and I get this letter saying that my North Channel swim was being contested because of the pictures that were shown in the article of the New York Times. And there was a lot of controversy if I had really completed my swim. And it was like 3 or 4 hectic weeks trying to get this sorted out. And finally, I guess common sense prevailed, and for those of you who have seen my landing in Scotland, there was no way I could stand up on all those rocks and have the water underneath my knees. And as you say, Ned, every swim is different. I mean, in Cook, I mean, there's no way you're going to be able to get on a beach, and the same thing happens with the North Channel. My first landing for the English Channel was among rocks. I mean, it was really difficult getting out of the water. Catalina, fortunately, have changed the place where you land. Remember, Stephen, or you, Ned, when you had to go, and to Palos Verdes in the middle of all the the
rocks.
The rocks and the thing. I mean, it's just so complicated. It was the most complicated thing, the swim, was getting out at the end.
Antonio, I'm older than you. It wasn't complicated at all. I was going to go over, through, or under those rocks to get to the end so I could go back to the boat and fall down. It doesn't matter how many rocks there were. I was going to finish that thing.
Yeah.
It is interesting. We talk about rules, and we all have our kind of own definitions. My rule on these things is I want somebody to say what they're going to do, and then I want them I want somebody else to say what they've done. And there was a famous Frenchman a few years ago, Philippe Pourcel. I can't pronounce his last name well, so apologies. He lost his arms and legs in an industrial accident. And in a wetsuit with an inline snorkel, I think one bit of a small flipper on one stump of his leg and one bit of a small flipper on one stump of an arm. He started in England and he swam and reached the nearest place south. And Hall of Fame honoree Jacques Tussaud swam with him. And there was no doubt that every now and then he'd bump into Jacques. And the man did an incredible swim. I got on a table and was applauding. Now, he didn't follow the rules of the English Channel Association, so he hasn't swum the English Channel. But this man with no arms and legs did an incredible swim from England to someplace south of there in a wetsuit with an inline snorkel and a couple of small flippers. I think it's one of the most amazing feats ever, and I applaud him. He didn't meet the rules.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, when you hear those stories.
Absolutely. So what's next for you, Antonio?
What's next for me? Well, now we are worldwide. We're in quarantine. So I wrote Mike Oram a week ago, and after a very lengthy email where he explained me many things, at the end said, "Well, I don't know if you're going to be able to swim or not." I have booked a double. I will try to do a double swim of the English Channel between the 26th of August and the 1st of September. But right now, as the rest of the world, we don't know what's going to happen, and I keep on training to be prepared in case I can do it. But I also know that right now there are more important things in my family, in my country, in the world, than doing a double crossing.
You'll be able to make it logistics wise. I have no doubt about that. I'm confident. I think the other thing that will happen in the English Channel this year is I think they will have a lot of cancellations. Some of them will be Corona related, but I think most of them will be first-time swimmers who haven't been able to do the training that they need mentally and physically to consider themselves ready. And I think the difference is that you and I have, and Steve have something that I call big swim memory, which is you've done whatever training you've done, and you've got yourself into a position where you're confident. Not overly confident, but confident. And then at, as you know, in Molokai at 18 hours, when you're at your mental low, you say, well, come on now, Antonio. I've done a lot of big swims. There's a lot of people watching. I just keep, do another 100 strokes. It'll be okay. Do maybe another 100 now. Swim till the next speed, and I'm sure, don't look up. Swim to the next speed. I'm sure it's close. One more feed. Okay, one more. And for first-time English Channel swimmers, often who haven't done a lot of other marathons, they'll lack that confidence and they'll cancel their swims. So there'll be plenty of openings for you this year.
Hopefully will. Yes, Steven.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you're in Mexico City, so you have a good amount of high altitude training, but you're far away from an ocean, yet you're going to the North Channel in Northern Ireland and Scotland. You're going to Northern Japan. You're going to the Cook Strait in New Zealand. How did you prepare? I know how you prepared. It was incredible what you do to prepare yourself to swim in oceans, warm oceans, cold oceans, rough oceans, living in Mexico City. Can you explain to people how you prepared?
Yes, it was a big realization. My training camp used to be La Jolla. I love La Jolla, and I have very good friends there. Tom Hecker, who's a great opening as a triple crowner, and Dan Simonelli, and all the people we swim there. But the ocean got warm. You go to Catalina in March, and it's going to be 18 degrees Celsius. So that wasn't an option for me. And as some of the people who are listening might know, I spent 8 years of my life in the Bay Area. And my son was going to school at Stanford. So it was a great excuse to tell Lucia that we need to go and see David every month. Imagine, I mean, we got to go see our son. I mean, you know, David had this joke that one day he said, "Mom, Dad, you know, not even the freshman parents come every month to see how their children are going on." When he's doing his PhD. So I went to aquatic park. I knew that people were swimming there, and I was really lucky. I have this joke that, you know, when you go to the South End Rowing Club, you have to have a key to be able to open the door. And so I would stand there and waiting until somebody would come and open the door, and I was sneaking. And that's how I met Simon Dominguez, who's the president of the South End Rowing Club. And Simon was very happy. He took me under his wing, and he introduced me to the different people that swam there. And that part of the world, in terms of the amount of open water swimming that is done.
You just stopped, Antonio.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse
You're
me?
back. You're back again.
That's how I met Cameron Bellamy. I met Kimberly Chambers, and so I started to get a group. And so what I would do is I would go for a week every month and spend my time in San Francisco, and I would swim twice a day and be in cold water. The first time I tried to, you know, I had to do my qualifying for my first attempt of the North Channel, which I couldn't go, so I had to cancel. And it was probably one of the most complicated swims in my life. I mean, the water was cold, I wasn't used to. And then the next year, I came back and I swam in January, and the water was about 10 degrees Celsius. And I got up to 45 minutes swimming at that temperature. And I was very proud. But that was the only way that I knew I was going to be able to succeed in the North Channel. And then you know, I had this crazy idea, talking to Dan Simonelli, that I would celebrate the 97th crossing of the Catalina Channel on the 15th of January. So when I tell my coaches that I was going to do a swim before Cook in January in Catalina at 14 degrees, they were not happy. But I want to have the confidence that I had been in the water at 14 degrees. Catalina, which that day had some big waves, but you know, nothing extraordinary. But you have to prepare for the cold. I mean, people who live in warm waters like Mexico, and like I do in Mexico, to me, that's the biggest challenge. It's not the amount of time you're going to be swimming. I mean, anybody who's a swimmer can swim as many hours. If you're fed well and drink enough water, you can swim as long as you want. But the cold water that's a big problem. That's a big problem.
Antonio, I ended up becoming a member of the South End Rowing Club for about $77 a year, so I could get the little key. And so I was so proud the first morning I went down really early. I let myself in and I went for a swim. I'm used to that temperature water. And then I came in the club and I went to the sauna. The sauna at the South End Rowing Club is to die for. But I didn't realize that the first person in the morning is supposed to turn it on to warm it up. So my ever nickname at South End Rowing Club is the rookie who didn't turn on the sauna before his swim.
Yeah, the key. I made a video about my first day using the key. I was so proud and so happy. But you know, the nice thing is the South End Rowing Club is a club, and I'm sure many dolphin members might be listening, but has some more relaxed atmosphere than the Dolphin Club. And the things that I like is, you know, you're supposed to be there at 6, but you know, you can come in at any time you want. So I used to come and swim at 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning. But then the other thing that I loved was Friday beer. And I said, well, if we're gonna have beer, and then somebody brought scotch, I said we have to bring Herradura Blanco. I mean, we can't just have beer without tequila in the sauna. So yeah, the atmosphere is very relaxed.
Now, I have to say to the listeners, beer in the South End Rowing Club is only allowed after you swim.
Yes.
After you swim. And the nicest thing about one of the nicest thing about the sauna is it doesn't matter how old you are. Everybody else in there looks older than you. So it makes you feel young and vital. The Dolphin Club is a club next door, a storied club. They have a lot of signs in the Dolphin Club that says, do not do this, do not do this, do not do this, do not do this. In the South End Rowing Club, there's one sign. It says kind of do whatever you want. It's a very different atmosphere.
Yes, definitely. I love the South End Rowing Club. I'm also a member there, and I really enjoy. I miss a little bit that I haven't been able to go and swim for a while now. Stephen, you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to ask, what was the funniest thing that a pilot said to you during any of your swims? The funniest that made you smile or laugh?
Well, I have to say that it doesn't come anything to my mind because they're not funny. The pilots are not funny guys. I mean, they're too serious. But one thing that I remember, and it was really, really, really odd for me that happened, is that when I was, remember in 10 years ago in 2009, when I was trying to do the Triple Crown in 1 year, I was at the end, and it was in England, and I had been waiting for almost 4 weeks to be able to swim. And finally, Mike Oram said, well, this is our last day that you can try. So we go out, and he says, well, if you don't like it after an hour and a half, we come back. And for some reason, the ocean was really, really kind to me, and it calmed down all the wind. And when we were passing in the middle part of the channel, Mike wrote, you just have a little bit to be a double triple crowner. And it was very, that cheered me. I mean, that Mike Oram, got into Nora's blackboard and signed and made a little note and all of that. That was to me something that I remember very well.
Antonio, we just got a question from Boris. And he said, do you have any advice for people who are in lockdown or quarantine as you are in Mexico City?
Well, this is something that I spoke to Rafa, and when we knew we were going to go into the quarantine, and we decided we had to keep focus on 3 things. Number one, that our goal was to maintain. I mean, you can't think that in quarantine you're going to be doing the things that you're doing when you are in this time of the season. Second, that we were going to do in this keeping in maintaining the cardiovascular part was going to be important. So I went back to all my triathlon toys, my rollers and my treadmill, and we're doing work there, and then do weights to keep the strength, but also do rubber bands. And so we have a routine of combining those 3 things. One day is weights, the other day is the rubber bands, and just keeping the cardiovascular part going.
Thank you.
I'd add 2 more things to that if I can. I think the first thing I would add is start planning your 2021 swims. Get your calendar out, contact the organizers, pay your entry fee, reserve your hotels, get your planes organized for 2021. Because this will pass and there will be a 2021. And if you wait until December, you'll find all those swims are booked. The second thing that I suggest, and you'll probably smile about this, is open every drawer and every closet in your house. Do the cleanup you've been promising yourself you would do for the last 20 years, and get your life organized so that when you're out of quarantine, you're stripped down and you're ready for action.
Well, there's a big now you and I have some difference, Ned. And I read the other day that somebody asked you, Ned, why are you swimming so much? I guess you had a time where you were doing, I don't know how many meters a day. And you said, well, I'm retired, so I can swim as much as I want. Some of us who are in quarantine, have to work with Zoom. And, that's something that I thought I was going to do, clean my closet. And every night, Lucia says, how's the closet going? I said, well, today I had a lot of work, a lot of Zoom conferences. So, but this is something that you said, it's something that has helped me is, and this is something that we are promoting with all the children that we have in schools, is that you have to keep your habits. I mean, you have to keep your schedule. I mean, it's not quarantine, it's not holidays. And, I start every day. Jimena makes a joke that says, Dad, you're working more than you were working when you weren't in quarantine, because now I have to be on Zoom at 9 o'clock in the morning for the first meeting, and then goes all the way until, about 6, 7 o'clock at night. So yeah, don't forget the routine. The routine is very important. And I agree with you, Ned, that, planning for next year is, the channels are going to be there. The swims are going to be there. And something that for all our friends in California, my guess, and I don't know what you think about this, Ned or Steven, is that by October we should be out of this. I think it's a good chance that we would be out of this. And there's this event that you went there last year. I couldn't go, Ned, the Ocean Fest, we should be planning hopefully to gather in Redondo Beach and be able to hug everybody and to kiss and to swim and to celebrate open water swimming. And what better place to celebrate it than Redondo in Southern California at the Ocean Fest. So if you ask me what do I have in mind more that I want to do more than my double English channel, is to go back to California, to Redondo, and have a great time at Ocean Fest.
Antonio,
go ahead,
Steve. No, you go.
You're talking about going to California. And I think one of your most interesting things of your life is how you actually first got to California. I mean, here you were, a young man, 16, 17 years old, a competitive swimmer. You want to go to Olympics, and all of a sudden you're at Stanford. How does that happen? Well,
I was very lucky. My first job was selling Speedo swimsuits. In Mexico, we didn't have Speedo swimsuit or goggles or caps. And I met, through my coach, Nelson Vargas, I met Bill Lee. As a matter of fact, up here is a picture of Bill and Shirley. At the 76 Olympics, I didn't make the team by about 10 seconds in the 1500, but Nelson took me anyway, and I went to the Olympics. And I asked Mr. Lee if he could get me a space to train over the next summer. And I went to swim with Richard Quick. And I had been calling Richard through the summer, and Richard would never answer my call. And Bill said, no, that's not good. You come and live with us in California. And he adopted me. Bill and Shirley adopted me. And I came back from the Olympics in '76 and told my mother and father, well, I'm going to go back to California. I'm going to go and live there. And so the first big question was, well, what are you going to study? And I said, well, Mrs. Lee said that she's going to enroll me at Los Altos High School. And to me, that was a big shock. And when the book comes out in English, for a Mexican, I went to the German school, which was a relative small school, and the Swiss school. In my class we were only 10 people in my class. So imagine arriving in Los Altos High School, where you had about 600, 700 kids. It was a big school for me. And then all this, talking about funny things, Stephen, in the States, if you're a swimmer, you're also a water polo player. Usually that happens. So they saw my times in the swimming, and they assumed that I was a great water polo player. So I never played water polo. So I arrived my first day was a Monday, and it was foggy in Los Altos High. So I arrived to the pool. I can see nothing. I mean, you can't see anything, and everybody's just getting in with putting their caps and the balls. And I get the ball in my hand. I didn't know what to do with it, so it was very frustrating. But I have to say that water polo, I enjoyed it. And one time, somebody asked me if I, was understanding the English. And I said, yes. To me, my goal was to play water polo, be able to swear, and be able to understand what was going on in English. And when I achieved that, I said, I'm in a different time in terms of my English. And then how did I get to Stanford? Just by luck, I have to say, and this is something that is in the book. I didn't want to go to Stanford. I wanted to go to a big powerhouse, a swimming powerhouse. So I wanted to go to USC, to Berkeley, to UCLA. In those days, Jim Gordon was the coach at Stanford. Stanford didn't have that big of a program in those days. And one of my teachers, Mrs. Sillins, my German teacher, said, Antonio, well, why do you, having a safety net, and why don't you apply to these other schools? And well, the usual suspects, your alma mater, Harvard, Brown, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, and Columbia. Columbia was, they were trying to recruit me. You went to Columbia, that's right, Ned. And so I got accepted at all of them, with except to Harvard. I was waitlisted at Harvard. And Bill Lee, I was going to go to Columbia. I said, well, the Columbia are going to be in the swim team, and I'm going to live in New York. Great, New York. This is the 70s. And Bill Lee said, Antonio, why don't you just take a trip during January to New York? You have to live in Harlem, okay? And see what that is. I mean, I'm sure you're going to like it. And Bill had gone to Stanford. So he said, well, why don't you stay here? You'll be closer to us. You can always keep on, you can always come back here and have dinner with us and stay here. And I think I made the great decision, and I stayed at Stanford. And I stayed very close to Bill and Shirley and Debbie and Joe and Grant and Gary and David. And, I consider that my American family, and I see them all the time. Remember, they were there at the WOWSA Awards, Stephen. Remember the big table?
Yeah, yes.
And who was a very good friend of, I don't know if you know this story, Ned, because you know him very well, Andy Burke.
I know Andy very well.
Well, at the 75 Pan American Games, Bill asked me if I could get him a chauffeur. And I said, yeah, I'm the best chauffeur. I mean, I can be your chauffeur. And I had a red Volkswagen, okay, a Beetle. And I go and pick Mr. Lee at the Camino Real, which at that time was the best hotel in Mexico City. And Bill tells me, you have to be here at 8 o'clock. I arrive punctual at 8 o'clock. And Bill arrives about 8:30. And I said, Bill, I said 8 o'clock. And in those days, I talked to him as Mr. Lee. I said, well, Antonio, all Mexicans are always late. And I got really pissed. He said, Mr. Lee, I'm not all Mexicans. I mean, you tell me a time and I'll be there. So the next time you're not on time, you're going to take a taxi. Is that understood? And I guess he didn't expect that from a 16-year-old guy. But then I didn't know Andy. And so suddenly Andy comes out, and we have only 5 spaces in the car because Andy was with his wife and Bill was with Shirley. And I said, well, where's Andy going to sit? And Bill said, Andy, you go in the back. So imagine Andy Burke. Andy Burke was like 6'3", 6'4".
Yeah.
He's really big. And he was sitting in the back of the Volkswagen Beetle. And that's how I met Andy Burke. And he was always great because he was very good friends of Bill and Shirley, and he would come by the house maybe every 15 days, every other 15 days, and had dinner with us. And it was always great talking about water polo stories. And yeah, he was a great guy. He's a great guy.
It is one of the interesting things and great things about the sport. The sport's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. However, for yourself, for me, for Steve, we travel around and we have friends in 10,000 places around the world. I got a message from Camille from Istanbul a couple days ago, said, when the quarantine is over, you got to come down here and swim, Ned. And so whether it was water polo or whether it's open water swimming, marathon swimming, the community the people who communicate, the people who travel, everywhere you go, you have a friend. Antonio, I wanted to ask you, what was the biggest mistake you made in one of your marathon swims?
There are a couple of ones. And one of them was lately, very, very, very close to in time, is that we lost count of the time coming back from Catalina on the way back. We had a rotation of 2 hours, and there was 6 kayakers, and suddenly they decided to go 1 hour for that sometime. So I got really, I thought I had gone 26 hours when I did 24 hours. I almost did negative splits, which makes me very proud to be able to swim back and forth in almost the same time. And that I lost concentration there. And that was a big mistake. Another one was probably when we did Catalina in October. And the time of the fires, and this is in I think 208, 207, 208, and I was coming back from being a triathlete, and this is something that to me happened, is that I was about 15, 20 pounds lighter, and it didn't occur to me that October was going to be much colder than the summer swims that I had done. And when I arrived and I get into the water and I see that 16 degrees Celsius, in those days, 16 degrees was very cold for me. And the next day was 15 and a half. And not being prepared for that was a big mistake. I consider it a big mistake. I was able to pull it out just because of so many times that I've swum. But, I'm glad you asked the question. It doesn't matter how many times you swum, how many swims you have. You gotta keep always concentrated as if it was your first time, and you have to be prepared for everything. And sometimes that doesn't happen, and that has happened to me, and it's I have suffered through it, and have been able to get out of it.
It's interesting. I think we all make mistakes. What I try to do is not make the same mistakes again and again. So even in Cabo a couple of weeks ago, I gave the kayaker a bag, and it had a spare cap and his spare goggles and a spare swimsuit. And he looked at me and he went, I said, look, if the string breaks on my swimsuit, I don't really need that. I could probably swim naked, but now I'm going to get
your fans will be very happy. I mean, that'll be a net experience. I mean, we'll have it at Steven would have wrote an article, and we'll put some pictures too. I mean,
can you imagine the sunburn I would have gotten on my white behind in Cabo? So we were speaking to Patrick Mallon yesterday, and he was talking about the North Channel, and he said, people show up with a brand of goggles they've never tried before for the North Channel. Or a swimming cap they've never worn before that doesn't stay on their head. So I think we're all going to make mistakes. For me in Cabo, one of the mistakes I made, it was a real rookie mistake. I'm used to point swim where you can't see land, so I don't look. But in Cabo, you swim along the coast, and there's a couple large headlands. And I made the mistake of looking at a headland up ahead, and I think the kayaker told me it was right around that headland. Well, it was kind of around the headland after that headland. and if it was the English Channel or something, you don't look up, because France looks the same 10 miles away as it does 1 mile away. So you don't look up, it doesn't help you, and it can depress you. But on this coastal swim, I made the mistake of looking ahead. And I just haven't done a coastal swim like that, I don't know, ever. So it was kind of a rookie mistake. I won't make that one again. Make a different one.
Definitely. Steven.
Yeah. Yes. So when you do all these swims, right now you haven't shaved in a few days. But I remember seeing, I think it was Molokai. You had a big cut on your shoulder. Was that Was that
Yeah.
because of your beard or your growth? What was that?
No, that was because I was number one. I wasn't, having the right emotion. And what happens is that I had shaved, and I was like you or Ned, and the whiskers were doing bad things to my shoulder. So what I decided is, remember, you guys remember Bjorn Borg?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Okay, Bjorn Borg had this idea or rule, or that before Wimbledon he wasn't going to shave. So after Molokai, I decided that I wasn't going to shave a month and a half before my big swim. So that's how I, if you look at all of the other pictures, I'm always with a beard, and that helps me that I do that, and I always look like a pirate. And remember, somebody asked me why I keep on swimming at 61, and I said that I was born in the wrong century. So I would have loved to being a pirate. I mean, I'd love to have my boat and go and do this, conquer all these places and get my treasure. And this is one of the things that happened with the North Channel, is that for about 2 or 3 months, I was telling the stories of pirates, and I had my pirate hat, and had my, talking about Quinton Nelson. He thought I was crazy because, the first time I meet him, I said, well, I know it's your boat, and I know it's something that's very special. I said, can I bring my flag? And he thought I was going to bring the Mexican flag, and I never bring the Mexican flag. I don't like it. Doesn't go with me. And so I bring my pirate hat, the flag. And if you see the boat, my flag is there. But Quinton was very concerned that the Mexican flag was not there. So he went and got a Mexican flag. So the next day I come and swim, and it's not only my flag, but also the Mexican flag up. And so I said, well, thank you, Quinton. She was really considered.
It can't be easy to buy a Mexican flag in Northern Ireland, I have to say.
If he did it, he put it out.
Let me add one more, Steve, about the cut on the shoulder. In the sport, I'm sure Antonio will agree with me, we have some definitions of what cheating is, right? You're not allowed to wear a wetsuit. That would be cheating. You're not allowed to wear flippers. That would be cheating. You're also not allowed to swim with a perfect stroke. That would be cheating. You need a degree of difficulty. So I get this little rub here as well. The famous marathon swimmer, David Udovin, I saw a picture of him one time, and his neck was just raw. It was like bleeding. And I asked him, I said, David, didn't you put any grease on? And he looked at me and he said, no. He goes, I like to know for a week or so after the swim that I did a great swim.
Oh, that's nice.
I think he forgot to put the grease on. It was a mistake, but he wouldn't admit it.
Yeah. And Tony, you mentioned in this interview a few times your book. Can you explain to people what you've written in your book, both that you've done and is coming out?
Yes. In the book in English is going to be, the name of the book is The Forever Swim. And it's a collaboration with Adam Skolnick, who is a writer who wrote the article, The New York Times. And it was really interesting to write the book because it combines my life, and not only my life. What I wanted to tell the younger generations is the Mexico I grew up and his parents grew up. And Mexico is going right now through a big change, a political change. And I was part of the generation that tried to transform Mexico in terms of opening the economy. And I was with the team that negotiated NAFTA. I did not negotiate NAFTA, but I was the Undersecretary of Administration with Jaime Serra, who was the Minister of Trade. And so that was one road. And the other one is telling about the Ocean 7. And I tell people that I learned one big lesson of each one of our swims. And the book tells what those lessons that the ocean taught me, how they relate to my life. You ask about going to the States. Just imagine the change to going to Mexico City to living in Los Altos. If I wasn't being able to adapt, I would have crushed. I mean, many of my friends in my generation went to the States and they couldn't stand for more than 3 or 4 months because they miss home. And at the beginning, we all miss home, but then you have to adapt. You know, when I first got to Stanford the first week, they asked me that I would have to read my essay. And just imagine, you know, I was so sad, almost crying, that I wasn't able to read without stopping. I mean, that was a big frustration. And open water swimming teaches a lot of frustration, and you have to be able to come out of those frustrations. So that's what the book is. It's in Spanish, it's been sold very well. We almost sold 3,000, which for a Mexican book in Spanish is Travesía Interminable. And if people are listening to us in Mexico or in Spain or in Latin America, it's in Mexico, it's in Amazon, and it's also in Amazon in Spain. And there also is a Kindle version. I was expecting the book in English to come out for my birthday, which is April 15th. But with this crisis, we haven't been able to work on it. And the final agreement between the distributor in the States, the book is already written. The book was originally written in English. And for our readers, I have to say that I had the honor that Mr. Munatones was part of the editing, did part of the editing of the book. He wrote a great quote, which is in the back of the English version, and hopefully we'll have it out before the end of the summer.
Do you have a copy behind you? Oh, there you go, so people can see. Great. That's a great shot. That's from a drone from above you. Yes.
You know what? When we're doing, you know, we don't have any more time, but I promise to tell it at some point how the picture came. I wanted to show how small we are in the ocean, how small as human beings are against nature. And when you write a book like this, you always have the main character's picture on in the front cover, and that was my first intention. But at the end, I wanted to show how small we all are in the ocean. And the other one, it's a great picture of me also swimming, and this is in the lake that I swim. And the other day I was showing this to a friend of mine, and he said, "God, it's photoshopped." And I said, "No, it's not photoshopped." So that's the book, Stephen.
Oh, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful time.
Antonio, time maybe for one more question. In your open water swimming career, give me 3 or 4 of the most interesting swimmers you've run into, marathon swimmers you've run into, and why you found them interesting.
Well, number one, I would say Dan Simonelli. Dan is somebody who is not only a friend, he's a great kayaker, and he has a wonderful heart. When I first started, David Clark was instrumental in, I would say, in my early days of open water swimmer. Tom Hecker, who for many years was my partner in La Jolla. And then when I moved up to San Francisco, Simon Dominguez is a great buddy. It's very, very interesting. And all that crowd, Kimberly Chambers, she's very funny and always up for a swim. Cameron Bellamy. Cameron is a wonderful, wonderful friend and a wonderful human being. I always say that if the fourth, the 4-time swim hadn't been going on the same day he was swimming in Barbados, his swim would have been, what he did swimming. But he's also a great, great person. Those are the people. Miguel Suñer in Spain, Tita Llorens. I would say, the things that Tita does, and also as a person. Selena, also a Spanish swimmer. So those are the swimmers that, if you could take just one thing of each one of them and put it together, you would have a wonderful, they're all wonderful people, wonderful swimmers, and they enjoy what they do, and they enjoy sharing it with me and with everybody else.
Well, listen, thank you very much for your time today. We hope